Hey guys, my name is Mercy. Welcome to my channel. I'm super excited for you to be here, and in this video I'm gonna try not to get emotional as I talk about a really scary time. Actually, I said I wasn't gonna get emotional. Not the first time. So I'm gonna talk about how my dad got COVID and share my family story, as I think it may be helpful to someone out there. Obviously, I asked my dad if I could share his story and he said yes. So how did he get COVID? He actually got it from my little brother. This happened a few months ago. Actually, it was during my first block as an intern, which was emergency medicine. So long story short, my little brother, who is 18, he's such a neat freak and germaphobe. He started working at a restaurant. That's where we think he got it, because he didn't hang out with friends at all. He didn't get out of the house unless it was to go to work, and then he came right back. To this day, I kind of feel guilty about agreeing for him to start working, because he did ask us all whether it's a good idea for him to start working. I was kind of against it, but everybody else was for it. So then I was like, all right, just go ahead. And now when I think about it, I'm like, I wish I had said no, and I wish I had pushed for him not to go. It is what it is. But he ended up getting all the signs and symptoms for a COVID patient: loss of taste, diarrhea like crazy, sore throat, body ache. I think that was the worst for him. And as soon as he began to have symptoms, I told him to stay in his room. He was quarantining. And then 7 days into his quarantine, my dad began to have symptoms. So it's my dad, my mom, my little sister, and my little brother who live in the same house. My dad Clorox everything when he's at work, and of course his guard was down when he came home. And that's the scary part with this virus. No matter how hard you try, one slip up can get you infected. So it's really scary. We literally took all the precautions just because my mom, who was sorry, it's been a horrible year. So it was, I try not to think about this, but I think that's another reason why it took me a little bit to make this video, because I wanted to not get emotional on camera. But my mom a year ago was diagnosed with breast cancer, and excuse me, and she went through chemotherapy, she went through radiation, sorry. So we were really scared for my mom to get it. She wasn't allowed to go out anywhere. Whenever we did grocery shopping, we would literally wash everything or sanitize it some way, somehow, and we wouldn't allow her to touch it for 24 hours. So that way we were taking all the precautions that we could, so to avoid her getting COVID. Like, we did all the right things, and somehow it managed to hit us. So it sucks, but it is what it is. So all four of them actually ended up getting COVID. So my little sister, who's 20, my little brother, 18, my mom, and my dad, and they live all together. My little sister didn't present any symptoms. My mom, surprisingly, didn't present any symptoms either. She did end up having bronchitis, but that was it. My little brother presented with all the signs and symptoms, and he went through his 14 days without having any issues. So as soon as we found out that he had those signs and symptoms, I got my little sister to buy pulse ox to make sure that oxygen saturation levels are good, and if it were to, you know, come down, we would take him to the ED. That's how I monitored him, essentially. So I kept up with him throughout the week, and he was doing great. I was really concerned with my mom getting it. If I were to bring her to my apartment, then I could get it, and then I could transfer it to my patient. So ultimately, it was just a really scary situation. Of course, I was scared for my dad too, but I wasn't that concerned with my dad. And I think one of the reasons why my mom didn't present with the signs and symptoms, I don't know, because her immune system was suppressed, and this is like an inflammatory reaction. She was positive for COVID when we tested her, but I think there's more studies being done. I haven't looked at the latest research in regards to that, to be honest. So my dad was doing fine in the beginning. So that's how COVID is usually at day 7 to 10. That's when things go downhill. That's when you really want to pay attention to the patient, between day 7 and day 10. My little brother, for whatever reason, it was taking forever for his results to come in. So we weren't 100% sure that he had COVID. But my dad was super scared, and he was like, I don't know if I have it, like what if I have it, I'm going to die. And like, because especially at that time, like things were super scary. It was even more unknown than what it is now, and I feel like we've gotten so much better now with treating it. Obviously we have a long way to go, and there's so many deaths from it on a daily basis, and actually the numbers are rising now. We are doing a lot better than we were before. Around day 3, I asked them to go to the ED. It could be pneumonia. Most likely you need to be treated with antibiotics. They did a chest x-ray, and it showed basically infiltrates all over, which looked more like the beginnings of a COVID patient. There was some lobular sections. He ended up getting sent home with antibiotics, and they had actually said that he most likely just has pneumonia and they'll treat him with antibiotics. That made my dad feel better, but I knew, and we were just monitoring him and checking his oxygen saturations. As the days were progressing, he was becoming worse. And then by day 7, I had sent him to the ED, but his saturations weren't below 92. Usually the ED will not admit you unless your saturation is below 92. If it's above 92, most likely you're going to be sent home and you just have to quarantine. And so at that time, it was above 92, so they sent him home, and then it kept on getting worse. Patients might look completely good, and then when they go to the bathroom or they get up and walk to the other side of the room, their saturation level comes down. They might not even show any symptoms while this is happening, but because they're on a pulse ox, you see that their saturations go down to like 87, 86. He would be so tired and fatigued by just walking to the bathroom. When I found out that he was desatting to 87, 86, like, okay, no way, we need you to go to the ED. So this is the problem with family, treating family, is because you also become in denial of things. And I was aware of that. I was feeling like I was in denial. I was so scared. But because I was realizing that I was in denial, because usually once a patient is admitted, the chances of them going to the ICU becomes higher, and I just wanted him to be okay, just like my little brother got over it. I wanted my dad to get through it and not need to go to the emergency department at all. I messaged my program director and I asked for her advice, and she was like, yeah, if he's like below 92, he needs to go to the ED. Actually, that very same night that he got admitted, I admitted a COVID patient who was also on his 10th day of quarantine, just like my dad. I was going back and forth, being on the phone with my dad and dealing with his like situation, to then taking care of my patient. It was just such a scary time. So obviously I'm an intern, and I have an older sister who's a registered nurse, working towards becoming a nurse practitioner, and also currently working in the ICU and taking care of a lot of COVID patients. So we both had some form of knowledge, her more than me. And so we were really, really involved with my dad's care. We would talk to the doctor every day, almost every day. We would talk to the nurse every single day. We FaceTimed my dad while he was in the hospital and multiple times throughout the day. And we would FaceTime him as a family every night before he went to bed. And he was there for 13 days. He was admitted for 13 days. As this was progressing, me and my sister were super involved. It's almost like that annoying family that's constantly asking questions, because like I said, we had some form of knowledge about what's going on, and we were asking whether Palm was consulted, ID was consulted. We were asking what are the medications that are being given, and then we would be like, okay, where's the antibiotics? Actually, at one point, so he started off being on antibiotics because of the pneumonia that was initially diagnosed. He did have a co-infection. Not only did he have a bacterial pneumonia, he also had COVID. So initially he was being treated with antibiotics, but then they discontinued the antibiotics, thinking that it's probably just COVID-19, and he was getting worse, which again, with COVID-19 you would see that. But I think they should have just continued with the antibiotics treatment. We pushed for it. We were like, wait, why are you not treating him with antibiotics? Like, what if he does have also bacterial pneumonia? And that's when we were like, why isn't ID involved just yet? Because usually the internist just takes care of it, and then when needed, if the patient's continuously getting worse, then you'd bring in the consults. But we weren't having it. We were like, no, we want pulmonary involved, we want ID involved. And so we were definitely pushy. And then the next day, ID was involved and they started him back on antibiotics. Thank God he never got to that point where he was intubated, but he was pretty close to that. He started out with being on nasal cannula for 3 liters to then progressing to 6 to then getting on high flow, and he started at 35 high flow to then increasing to 45 to 65 to going back to 45 to then going to 95. And at that time, that's when, so this was day 5 or 6, and I think at that point I thought he was going to be intubated. And he had lost so much weight by this point. And actually that night they're preparing to intubate him overnight because he had, I think they were also, because right prior to that, actually, he had sudden onset of shortness of breath. I think it may have been anxiety, but they thought maybe it could be pulmonary embolism. And so they worked him up for that. And that's when he went to the ICU. And once a patient goes to the ICU, I don't know about the statistics at this point in time because it has been some time now and I haven't kept up with it. But at that point in time, when a patient went to the ICU, the chances were most likely that they would pass away from COVID. And there was just so much going on within my family as well. With my mom, at that point we knew my mom had it as well, and we were scared for my mom. We were just freaking out on another level. And that night we thought he was gonna get intubated, and all is well now. I'm trying to keep telling myself this. He's good now, he's great now, but gosh, it was such a fucking scary time. Nobody could see him, nobody could visit him, and obviously when I spoke to him, I made it seem like everything was good, he was gonna be better, and just sent him positive energy, positive vibes, not wanting him to think about the negative things that could happen. And I remember that's all I had felt. I remember as soon as I would get off the phone with him, there were times, because I worked in the ED, I would have to go to the bathroom to just cry, and it was just hard. And I had like a breakdown. I had a huge breakdown. I shouldn't be laughing. I was on the phone with my mom. And I thought my dad was gone. That day when I had my breakdown, I literally thought he was gone. I was teaching him. I was telling him how to breathe. So it's really, really, really important for someone that has COVID to lie down on their belly, and this allows their lungs to be able to expand properly. And no matter how many times I told him, I feel like he didn't understand the importance of it. I don't think we all did. And then he finally listened to me. I think this was a couple days in while he was admitted, and I think that made a huge difference in his breathing. Actually, during that academic day on pneumonia, our program director was stressing out how like pronation is really, really important. And then I was looking at the criteria and like reading up on things, and I really stressed out the him lying down on his belly, and I think that really, really helped him. God forbid, if anyone that you know has COVID, make sure that they're constantly lying down on their belly and allowing their lungs to expand properly. Interestingly enough, he doesn't even have hypertension, he doesn't have diabetes, he is generally a really healthy guy, but he did smoke for over 30 years, but it has been 15 years or no, about 10 years since he stopped, give or take 10 years. That was his only thing that would go against him. And then also because he's older, so he had 2 risk factors, I guess you would say. But my mom had a lot more. Thank God, at least my mom didn't. Who knows what would have happened then. So I wasn't really even concerned for my dad. So my dad was ultimately being treated with remdesivir, the antibiotics. He wasn't given plasma, because that's another form of treatment that is used depending on how bad the situation is. And he was in the ICU for several days. Sorry, the lighting got super dark. Where was I? My dad ended up getting better. He went from needing 65 to needing only 35 to then getting on a nasal cannula over, I think, 2 days. He ended up being on nasal cannula for a little bit, and then my dad was just so sick of being in the hospital. We kept him there until like he needed about 5 liters, and then as long as like the internist was good to release him, and my dad was really pushing for it, and we were okay with him also going home as well. Once he got home, it took a little bit for him to get better. He was sent home with supplemental oxygen, especially when he was like showering or moving around the house. He would need that nasal cannula. For 2 weeks, he was still requiring the nasal cannula, and then it took some time, but over maybe a month and a half is when he got better. And actually the other day he was here in my apartment, and I looked over, I'm like, oh yeah, Dad, how are you? Because I had completely forgot him having COVID and being in the hospital, that terrible time. He's like, are you kidding me? You're asking me now? Like, I just forgot. I mean, obviously I still react. Obviously the pain is still there when I think about it, and I don't think the pain will ever go away entirely. I'm thinking about those hard times, it still makes you sad, and I think the way I cope with things is I try to just move forward and think about the next step and think about what it is now and how things are doing well now, and try not to dwell over the past. So really thankful that it's done and it's in the past, and thank God he's doing well. And so when I hear about COVID patients and when I hear about people passing away, and it reminds me of my dad's situation and how lucky we are. You know, there's so many people that have passed, over 1 million worldwide have passed away from COVID. And it gets really upsetting when I hear people that don't believe that COVID is real, or that make COVID seem like it's nothing, because it's something. It really makes me angry when people dismiss it so easily. You know, we're progressing, we're getting better with our treatments. And it's just so crazy when I hear people saying, well, now we can't trust doctors because they said one thing one time and now they're changing their game plan. It's because we're learning more, we're understanding more, we're progressing to be better at taking care of the virus. So obviously, as we're progressing to get better, our treatments are better, and the plan might be different than what it was before, and that's a good thing. Make sure that we're taking this seriously, and do your part by washing your hands constantly, by wearing a mask, by keeping socially distant from others, especially elderly that you could infect and they could end up in the hospital. So thankfully my dad did recover. But with COVID, we don't know the long-term implications of COVID. My mom's great as well. She quarantined, everyone's quarantined, and we're continuing to make sure that we're washing our hands, wearing masks, and socially distancing. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you and your family are protected and that we get through this really crazy time. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the like button if you guys are interested in watching more of my videos. Go ahead and check out the playlist in the description box below, or on the sidebar. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.